There are 3 essentials for proper detoxification. These are the pillars for proper detox, and I see them being missed all the time in new patients that present to the Byron Herbalist clinic. And when we're working together and we find, look, we need to really support these detox channels, we need to get these kind of foundation under you so you can detox more effectively, patients frequently see significant improvements in things like skin, digestion, energy, mood, and more. So let's jump into it. Number 1 detox essential is better bowel movements, more complete, better motility, moving things through your digestive tract. And anyone who's been following along for a while might be getting a little bit tired of me kind of banging on about bowel movements, but they're really a window into your digestive tract and your body globally. How well are you eliminating in that final step? So if this is the last stage of detoxification, right, everything gets dumped into the bowels and gets eliminated via the bowel movement, and it's blocked, meaning you are having incomplete bowel movements, maybe you're having small bowel movements, maybe you're skipping days, maybe you're straining to pass these bowel movements. That is a number 1 priority, the number 1 priority to focus on before any of these other fancy detox support programs. You might have found it online, you might have read about it, a celebrity might be doing it, but getting those bowel movements working properly is essential. Now, there are a bunch of basic ways to support bowel movements if you are not properly hydrated, if you're not moving enough, if you don't have the proper anatomical position when you're having a bowel movement, meaning lifting up your legs, lifting up your feet and leaning forwards. Got these great kind of stools, Easy Stool or the Squatty Potty, that can really help with that position for a better bowel movement. More complete, easier to pass daily, that's the goal. And then if we're looking for more advanced therapies, we can work with herbal medicines that can move the bowels, laxatives that can support motility, prokinetics. And I've got a video on a patient that was initially presenting with constipation, bloating, and slow motility, and one and done, 1 round, 4 to 6 weeks of herbal medicine, almost complete resolution of her symptoms, so that was exciting. And then also using things like prebiotic fibers, tailored to the case. So I love partially hydrolyzed guar gum. It's a great place to start if you're constipated. Go low and go slow. And the other really big one would be probiotics, tailored probiotics. Now, I have found that a blend of lactobacillus and bifidobacteria just off the shelf, maybe kind of 30 to 50 billion per capsule is a good place to start. And if we're looking to really kind of fine tune that down to a species and even a strain, Bifidobacterium lactis HN019 is a really great place to start if you're looking for that advanced therapy to get the bowels moving. Now remember, none of this is a recommendation for you. This is just for educational purposes only. I don't know your case. I don't know the specifics. Get educated and work with a really skilled practitioner that's been there before and knows what to do and what kind of tools to turn to when things aren't going right. Now, if we're working on from essential number 1, better bowel movements, that's dialed in. You can move on to the next step, getting the bile flowing properly. We're talking about bile production in the liver, and then storage in the gallbladder, and then finally that bile is dumped into the small bowel. And the big thing here to recognize is that a lot of toxins travel along that same route, right? This is part of phase 3 detox. And we pay so much lip service to phase 1 detox that produces these kind of like reactive intermediaries. Phase 2 comes along, it's kind of like substrate based, whether that's glutathione or like an amino acid conjugation, whatever's happening there to take that reactive intermediary, bind to it and eliminate it, and that eliminated is that phase 3 step, and a lot of that moves through alongside bile into the small bowel. Now, when this is compromised, patients tend to be experiencing loose, watery bowel movements. Not always. I have been seeing a raft of constipated patients that are having issues with bile flow, and we can test that using a stool marker called steatocrit. How much fat is in your stool? If there is a significant amount of fat in your stool, 15, 20, 30, 40% of your stool is fat, then you are not having proper bile flow, you're not emulsifying, breaking down, and then kind of absorbing that broken down fat into the body where it should be, and it's winding up in your stool. The other really big presentation there that I'd be looking for, it's not in everyone, would be low fat soluble vitamins. Again, poor bile flow, issues digesting fat, and then issues absorbing fat and fat-soluble vitamins into the body. And the really big one there would be vitamin D. That's an epidemic. I mean, people are vitamin D deficient because they're not spending enough time in the sun, so it doesn't have to be poor bile flow, but the other really big one there would be vitamin A as well. Now, another huge symptom of poor bile flow, and this is kind of a little key, is whether this is you or not, is digestive symptoms. So bile acids do a bunch of things, but one big thing is they are antimicrobial. They also keep the digestive tract moving at the proper speed when everything's in balance. And it's all about balance, homeostasis. And so when bile acids are not flowing properly, you can get a buildup of bacteria in the wrong spot. And here I would be thinking about SIBO, or it could be the methane archaea. They're taking up residence in the small bowel because bile acids are not keeping them in check. And so symptoms there could be things like bloating, distension, gassiness, abdominal pain, could be constipation, or it could be diarrhea. The really big piece to recognize here is that these toxins, remember we said phase 3, they get transported through that whole system with bile. The really kind of obvious ones would be heavy metals. I mean, a big one there would be certain forms of mercury. And then another major class of toxins that I see all the time, they're biotoxins that are formed from mold exposure in the environment, or actually mold and fungal overgrowths growing in your body, and they are called mycotoxins. They are fat soluble, they travel through your lymphatic system, and they can kind of really gunk up that whole immune aspect of your physiology, and they also travel through the biliary tract, from the liver, the biliary tract out into the small bowel as well. Now don't forget, when the bile gets reabsorbed back in the body, that really precious resource, the toxins that are traveling with that bile get reabsorbed as well. So here we can use some more advanced approaches and some detox therapies, things like binders and like insoluble fiber. And I have done a whole video on that around mycotoxins, which I frequently treat. Mold exposure is a big thing here in Australia. You can check that out here. If this video is helpful, don't forget to subscribe. That tells me you're getting something out of it, and I'll keep making them for you. So if we're talking about recommendations to help improve bile flow, I will frequently recommend herbal medicines for my patients that need this, tailored herbal medicines for the case. I'm going to choose the right herb for the right patient, and that would be a range of choleretic herbal medicines, which help with bile production in the liver. They support that production, ranging through to cholagogues, which help the flow of bile from the gallbladder where it's stored to the small bowel. And so really big recommendations here, and again, this is specific for the patient, would be things like dandelion root, globe artichoke, fringe tree, barberry, Oregon grape root, milk thistle, turmeric, and even a herb called boldo can be really helpful. Now, all of these herbs have kind of secondary actions or supporting actions. So for example, if someone was dealing with toxic exposure and we wanted to help protect their liver, right? They had raised liver enzymes on blood testing showing that their liver is being damaged, right? That's where those enzymes come from. It's where they get liberated from when the liver gets kind of actively damaged. It's when they go high. Milk thistle would be really, really huge here. If they were dealing with something like leaky gut at the same time, and we've got good data showing that certain mold byproducts, mycotoxins like trichothecenes, can actually cause gastrointestinal necrotic lesions. I mean, it almost sounds sci-fi to me. Something like turmeric would be really helpful there as well. So you really got to choose the right herb for the right patient, and we want one herb to be doing a bunch of things in the body, so we don't have to take a bunch of herbal medicines, one for this, one for that, one for this. If the one herb can do 3 or 4 things, then we can get synergy even in one herb and your body, which is definitely the win. That's what we're going for. So if we're moving on from herbs, we're talking about nutrients. A lot of the amino acids can be really helpful at keeping that bile flowing properly. Taurine is standout here. Again, it can just keep that bile moving properly, keep it nice and thin and mobile. But the problem with taurine is that it is sulfur based, so it might not be tolerated by everyone. Those sensitive patients might be having trouble with sulfur. The other really big one there would be choline, very specifically phosphatidylcholine, that is made by the body. You can supplement with it, and again, it keeps that bile flowing. It keeps it nice and thin so it doesn't get sluggish and stop flowing quite as well as we want it to. Another great amino acid here would be glycine, and again, if we're looking for more actions than just one, right? If you're just doing one thing with each of your recommendations, my patients would be taking 20 or 30 supplements. Too busy, too noisy, you'd lose track of what was doing what, if it's working or if it's not working. Glycine can be really helpful, again, to keep that bile flowing, but it's also an inhibitory neurotransmitter, so it can calm down an overactive or an excitable nervous system. And I've done a video on nervous system burnout and herbs that I would use where we go into some of that pathophysiology here. You can check that out when you have time. Now, the final essential for proper detoxification, we're talking about nutrients that power detox enzymes. And I've talked about this before. I'm going to talk about it again. I get lots of great results, huge improvements in symptoms when we support these blocked or slow functioning enzymes. They need a little bit of love, a little bit of support. And what supports them is very specific and targeted nutrients depending on the enzyme. And we call these either cofactors or coenzymes. And they are loads of B vitamins. They run the show in the body. And also minerals, things like zinc, things like magnesium, things like copper, things like molybdenum. They are all essential so that these detox enzymes in the body can run efficiently. So I see this being misunderstood in comments, when I talked about this before, which is totally understandable. I am not talking about digestive enzymes, whether they're made in the pancreas or the stomach or, the mouth, amylase, protease, lipase. I'm not talking about those enzymes. I'm talking about the enzymes that run our body. And there are more enzymes than I can list. If we're talking about histamine detox, it would be something like DAO, diamine oxidase, mainly made in your digestive tract. Some other really big ones when we're talking about histamine would be HNMT, histamine N-methyltransferase. It's a methyltransferase enzyme, again, that helps to break down histamine inside the cells. And so our whole body is made up with these different pathways that help convert something, for example, like histamine, into a non-toxic product that the body can eliminate. That happens in the cells, it happens in the liver, it happens in the digestive tract, it happens everywhere. It's ubiquitous. And so here we're just laying the foundations for future videos where we're going to get into that nitty-gritty and talk about these kind of detox pathways. But for example, if we're talking about something like aldehyde dehydrogenase, which is this huge nexus point of histamine breakdown and candida overgrowth in the gut, it even shares a pathway with alcohol metabolism. That is a huge place to focus on for certain patients. You know, some patients, they're so unwell, they almost feel hungover constantly, perpetually. They'll wake up feeling hungover. They haven't touched alcohol in a decade, and they'll go to sleep feeling hungover. They'll feel nauseous. They'll have headaches, brain fog, and really focusing in on that enzyme, aldehyde dehydrogenase, supporting it with these nutrients that keep it working well and functioning properly, getting it kind of spinning properly, and then detoxifying those toxins. And so here we would be using functional lab testing like organic acid tests to determine what your nutrient deficiency was. Maybe you're B12 deficient and you can't methylate properly. Maybe you're B9 deficient and you can't methylate properly. Maybe you're B2 deficient and you can't methylate properly, right? Methylation's huge on detoxification. That's going to power things like histamine detox. That's going to power things like hormone detox. That's going to power things like neurotransmitter detox. And if you are deficient in those cofactors, those B vitamins, B12, B9, B2 that help power that methylation process, you are definitely going to be on the back foot on proper detoxification. And so targeted nutrition, when we know what's going on for you, I mean, most of the patients that I work with here in Australia have low zinc. If you are lab low on zinc, you definitely need to normalize that, get that up off the ground so you can detoxify properly. Another category of nutrient supplementation that I turn to all the time to help support detoxification would be NRF2 upregulators. And this is the difference between selling a person a fish or teaching a person to fish. And these NRF2 upregulators are teaching your body, retraining your body how to detoxify on its own. And the two really big ones there that I use would be sulforaphane, that would be broccoli sprout extract, and the other really big one would be quercetin. Now we're right down there in the nitty-gritty on individual supplementations, but pulling it back to a little bit more of a broader view, make sure that you are eating a nutrient-dense diet, the standard American diet, the SAD diet. I mean, you can replace Australian, the standard Australian diet. It just does not have the nutrients in it that will help support your detoxification needs. So make sure you're eating a nutrient-dense diet. You know, an old recommendation was eat the rainbow. A lot of people are moving away from things like red meat. Red meat is a superfood. I'm a huge proponent of red meat. I personally feel better when I'm eating a sufficient amount of red meat, getting that protein, getting those B vitamins, getting that iron. And most of my patients feel better again when they're eating red meat. If you're a vegetarian or you're a vegan, you're plant-based and you're not into things like red meat or animal proteins, that's okay. We can fill the gaps with some of the nutritional needs and supplement with it. And focusing in broadly on diet and then targeted for your needs, that's really where we get the best bang for the buck with your third essential for detoxification. Now, reviewing your nutrient deficiencies using something like an organic acids test can be daunting. I totally get it. It's overwhelming. So I put together a case study of a patient who was dealing with a fungal overgrowth. It was burning through her nutrients and she was winding up with quite significant histamine overload. And you can check out how we supported her here.